You're very welcome back. In this video, what I'd like to talk about is precision and why it matters in everything. And it's something I've realized in the sport that I'm in, but it's also something I've realized now that I've always had as characteristic traits, and why that's actually important as well. Precise inputs give you precise outputs. When you commit to something, you can't go back on it. Whether it's training at 5 o'clock in the morning, whether it's delivering a piece of work you've committed to, things like that, there is no movement in. You commit to it, you do it. If you're going to vary what you mean by commitment, then you have to vary what you mean in output. Precise inputs give precise outputs. In my shooting, I have to execute a process meticulously. I have to commit to every element of it. The reason that it fails when it fails is because I've omitted one of those elements. But because I have a confined process that I apply, I can go back and I can analyze which element of it failed. I can correct it and I can move forward. The output is expected based on the process that has been proven to deliver that output. Similarly in projects, if you don't have precise elements, you can't expect precise outputs either. So that's precise resources delivering precise quality at a precise time that's been agreed so that you can deliver a project on time. Budgets, they're not in the air. They have to be defined. Why do we focus? If you think about it, if you said you were going to deliver a project on a certain date, people would let that, actually they wouldn't let it go. They'd go, it needs to be done on that date. However, you ask someone what it's going to cost and suddenly everyone tightens up because there's an implication. So why not bring that same implication into everything you do? If you're flexible on the way in, don't be surprised if you get results that are flexible on the way out. Most people treat inconsistent results as bad luck. It's not. It's because they don't have a locked process. Some don't even have a process. Yeah, we do need luck, but luck works for you when you've already got a plan in place. And what I'd say too is if you're going to perform at the highest level in a role in work, whether it's managing and running your own business, managing a department, whether you're delivering a solution to a company, or whether you're standing on a firing line ready to take on the world's elite in Paralympic shooting. It's the standard, it's not the mindset. The base level is commitment. And by that I mean you own it. You're responsible for it. So you lock yourself in, you focus on what needs to be delivered. You deliver and you measure the outcome. You can't measure luck. What I'd say is if you miss something, and then the beauty of this shooting, for example, is you can pretty much tell where something went wrong. So if I have an incomplete base setup, how can I equate that for someone? So if I'm unbalanced, rifles bouncing all over the place, I can't possibly ever get a clean shot off because the sight's never on the target long enough to take the shot. If you're going to deliver a website, for example, an e-commerce platform, it can never be delivered properly if you don't have a developer that can actually do the development work, or a designer who can design it properly, or a coder who can actually write whatever plugins or APIs you need written. You don't get inconsistent downstream if upstream is not locked in. And that's why the process is so important and that it's precise. There can't be flexibility in the process or it doesn't hold water. If it's not a precise process, you're not getting a precise outcome and don't expect one. If the inputs aren't locked in my shooting, the timing, the method, the outcome's never going to be repeatable. And in shooting, for me, I've got 60 shots for a qualifier, for example. And if I'm lucky enough, I think it's 24 shots in a final, which would give me a gold medal. How can I repeat look 60 times under pressure? There's the thing. All well and good when you're sitting in a lovely, comfortable spot and you're talking about, yeah, you can pull shots out of the sky and take them and there's no issues. Go to an environment where there's pressure. Similarly in work, in a business. Everybody works really well when there's no pressure. Now when pressure comes on, there's no process. All you've been doing is holding things together, and suddenly the output starts to vary. So you have to be precise in the process design. You have to be precise in the execution, and then you can expect a reliable outcome. That's the reality of it. I do think as well, by the way, that precision is a decision. It's not a trait. I don't. I'm not a big person on all this talent, by the way. Ability, yeah, talent, yeah. And also, by the way, either of those, if you want to go with them, they'll only get you so far. After that, you have to look at where you want to get to. So, in a small pond, you'll get away with being sloppy. You will, without planning, without focus, without really working. Um, So, for example, you'll see someone some young person wants to play golf, if used golf as the thing, and they'll put an hour in a day, and everyone thinks, God, they're massively committed to giving it an hour. But then when you come up onto the bigger platform, you're dealing with countries where there are thousands competing for that spot at that same person at a local level. A golfer, for example, a junior, they're competing for that spot in their country, and I can tell you it's hours per day, not an hour per day, because they have the volume, because they have the mindset, because that's the way they work. You have to decide if you're going to come up against that you have to be precise. You're precise in what your outcome is meant to be. You're precise in building a process to deliver that outcome, and you're precise in how you analyze. You analyze the tough numbers too. Every number's telling you something. There's no wrong numbers, there's just the numbers, it's data. In shooting, a 10.9 could be considered a great shot. A 9 could be considered a bad shot. But if you apply the principle of the clock being broken and yet it's correct twice a day, that 10.9 could be a shot that was not in line with your process. All the shots may have been 10.2, for example. That may have been your process. And the 10.9, while we might want to lie into that and go, I've struck gold, now I know what's going on, you won't. What I'd say is I've given my word to deliver the amount of work in a quality way, if you want, or the amount of quality work in a way that the outcome is hopefully Los Angeles in 28. And I say hopefully. Hope is not a thing, but what I'm without the funding, I won't be going anywhere. That's one aspect. So that's why I have to be lucky in that. I'm definitely not lucky in the things I have control over, like the shooting process. That's locked in and that's delivering. But there's a lot of luck that has to be there, health, things like that. You just don't know what's going to happen over the 2 years. But you give your word that you're going to get up every day, and that's commitment and that's discipline. The standard never gives up under pressure, and that's why the system I've built is actually so strong. Wales is an example where it was a personal best under constrained circumstances, but the process was so strong that actually the jury member had to tip me on the shoulder and tell me I had finished, because I don't acknowledge shots before or after. I only acknowledge the shot I'm in. Outside of what I'm committed to, yeah, I mean, I can have fun, I can have crack, but when I go to shoot, I go to work. When I go to work, the game face goes on, the head goes on, and the focus goes on. And it's not the same as the day to day when I'm not in that shooting mode. And that's the way it has to be. I'm a believer in constants over variables. If you start introducing variables into your system, you can expect variable outcomes. A constant, similar to code, the value never changes. That way you can analyze something, but you can't keep making changes within the analysis. So if you're in your process and you're going to do things 3 different ways, you're going to get 3 different outcomes if you're lucky. If not, you might get more. Um, I run my process with constants. So I execute a certain process a certain way and measure the outcome. And once I've established that's the outcome, then I know that's either right or wrong. I can improve or I can hold and I can move on to the next one. But when I start introducing different variables, doing different things the different ways, there's no way to keep consistency there. There's just not. A constant gives you the expected output. That's the reality. And variables give you chaos. That can get into your head. Then you're going, oh, well, that didn't work, and why is that not working? And it's because you've introduced things like projects, like business. You have a process that delivers an outcome. If you start messing with that process mid execution, how can you actually judge whether or not it's working right or wrong? But I have to be straight too. I don't apply precision everywhere. You can't. I couldn't hold. For example, I'm meeting a buddy for a cup of coffee. I don't hold them to the same level that I do if I say I'm going to train at the range at a certain time. Everyone needs to show up with the game heads. Why? Because it's a different, I suppose, a different focus. We go in there, we train, we come out, we can have the coffee then, and then there's banter, but like it's not something you have all the time. It'd be a very boring world if you went around tying people to commitments for cups of coffee, meeting up, social clubs, things like that, other interests that you'd have. But when you go in, you have to lock in. Similar to work, I don't think I've ever experienced a work environment where I went in for a social outing. It was always to deliver. And another thing that I think it's a gift and a curse all in one. I don't have a B game because I don't want one. I deliver A answers every time. I've never gone, I'm going to give someone the second best answer and see if it slides. I give the best answer all the time that I have available to me based on the information. And that would be lived through in my training environment as well. And the standard doesn't move, or the output does. You need to remember too, this is not dissimilar to a business, a big business. I'm taking my business onto the global platform and putting it up against other businesses if you want. I'm taking my shooting on a global platform against other shooters. The standard I hold myself to is the one that is going to deliver on that platform. I won't suddenly get there and flick a switch and suddenly I'm into elite shooter mode. I train with the same mindset that I execute the competitions in. That's it. Once I've given the word, which I have, and it's a word to me, by the way, which is the hardest one, but the most rewarding one. When you give yourself your word to you that you're going to get something done, come hell or high water, wild horses won't pull me away from this until the decision is made that this is no longer what I want to do, if that becomes the case. It's not stubbornness, it's about ownership, and that's something that's going to be featuring in some of the other videos. Experience would have been early on in my IT career. I had a project where I was managing IT infrastructure for multinational, and we're bringing country in live on a certain morning. So it was a phone system, call center, and those phones are reverted to your phones from that country at a certain time on a certain date. So things have to be in place. And I'd given, I suppose, I'd given one of my team members the opportunity to deliver the project. For me, it was straightforward, simple enough, but talked them through it, and they gave me the impression from everything they were saying that they were in charge of it and they knew everything that was going to be necessary. And I suppose the long and the short of it is I did a spot check on the Sunday. They were going live on the Monday, and the PCs weren't even configured. And there's a fallback. So there's a point where I allow things go until I have to stop them, and it's personal ownership. I've given a commitment that's going to be done. No one should ever have to question, is he in charge or is he not? And sometimes you can't. You have to let people fail so that you can help them succeed in the future. In this case, we couldn't afford that. I'd given them up until the day before they were going to go live, so I actually slipped in 100 PCs, I think it was. There was no way we were going to do them individually, so I wrote a little script that allowed me to do 10 at a time. For me, that was pretty simple, but my word was getting it live. the company didn't deserve to be let down, so that someone could learn in that case. It was done anyway. The outcome is you can't outsource ownership. Someone actually has to step up and say, I want to own it. And that's something I learned from that. That was very early on. That was probably my first supervisory role in some cases. And I learned very quickly, you can't outsource responsibility of ownership. Someone has to want it. And when someone owns it, they own the outcome. That's the reality. But when you give someone responsibility like that, they don't own it. You've given them something. So from where I am now, it's something that I've had 30 years at now. Someone has to tell me what it means to them to own something, because not everyone owns things the same way. And not everyone is a timekeeper the same way. Not everyone is a deliverer the same way. And everyone views themselves, by the way, nothing wrong with this. Everyone views themselves as a high performer, except the high performers, funnily enough. We're always trying to figure out how do I get better, whereas mediocre always thinks it's overworked and overrun. That won't suit everybody. That doesn't mean it's wrong, though. I think you audit the inputs, not the outcome particularly. The outcome, by the way, in shooting, it's a data point, it's a score. If the results need to be repeatable, what's still flexible is a question I'd ask and remove it. I lock in what can be locked. Remove all the variables that are possible, so I work with constants. And I judge the process on its own strength before I judge the result. So the output, I'll know in my process if it felt locked, if you want. So I'm very rarely surprised by an outcome, very rarely. If you can't lock in the inputs, don't expect to be able to lock in the outputs. That's the reality. And what I'd say is accept it or stop it. If you are happy with that, fine. Here's the thing is, if you're happy with that, fine. If you're not, do something about it. The thing about it is, people would be aspirational in loads of ways. Like, you'll know it as well as I do. People, going to set up a business. Why? Because it gives me independence, gives me all these things. And then you realize actually it didn't work out that well because it wasn't as well thought through. Because it's tough. Because it's not easy. And business is not easy. There is no doubt about that. Shooting, I mean, I can accept if I want variable numbers. I could like spend a lot less time training, and what would that achieve? Well, then I end up hitting everything except what I want. I can talk a great game about, oh, you know, I'm capable of more 10.9s, 10.8s, all that. But if I'm not holding myself accountable enough about the precision, everything needs to be precise. In this sport, it's so precise. Again, bullseye is 0.5 millimeter in size. 0.5 millimeter. 10 circles within that. The outside of the 0.5 millimeter is 10.0. The dead center of the 0.5 millimeter is 10.9. So it's 10.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. I have to be able to hit 10.5 and above, which is half of 0.5 millimeter. So I don't get to not be precise, or I do, and then I can't complain about it. I don't see precision. It's not complex. It's really not. Some people have said to me before, oh, you know, you make that sound very simple. Well, I definitely never got paid to make things sound more complex, and I just won't. I refuse to. People like to make things sound complex. Fine. If that's what your metric is, fine. I like to simplify things as much as possible because I don't believe everything has to be complex. And the solutions are a lot simpler than most people like to make them think as well. So what I'd say is if the process isn't tight and isn't precise, don't expect the output to be. Thank you.